Hi folks, and welcome back to another video. My name is Shah and this is Thoroughly Enjoyed Books. You're gonna have to forgive my neighbours are doing some work on the house, so you might be able to hear some banging in the background, but this is the only time I can film this weekend, so you're gonna just have to put up with it. Today I am finally bringing you my review of Good Material by Dolly Alderton, which is the first book that I read in January. So it's the first book that I read this year. I was given this as like a birthday Christmas present from my friend Amy, and I'm really grateful that she got me this because I absolutely loved it. And she gave me this because I had recommended Ghosts by Dolly Alderton to her and she really loved it. So I think Dolly Alderton is kind of our friendship author, if you can say that. It's freezing in here. Bear with me 1 minute while I get a cardigan. That's much better. I just didn't want the heating back on. So previously I read Ghosts by Dolly Alderton, which is all about dating, and Good Material isn't too different from that. I think what Dolly Alderton is known for is writing books about love and dating. Her first book was a non-fiction book called Everything I Know About Love, and that is all about the experiences she's had with love, both platonic and non-platonic, romantic, etc. and the experiences she's had dating, falling in love, falling out of love, friendships, all that kind of thing. It's kind of what she's known for. And when I read Ghosts in 2021 maybe, I really loved it. It's about a woman who's just turned 32, is just getting back on the dating scene, is using dating apps and discovers just how horrific dating apps can actually be. In Good Material, we had Dolly Alderton back at her best, writing about a breakup. This is slightly different, however. So this book is written from a male point of view, and our main character is Andy, who has just broken up with his girlfriend of 4 years. Everything is kind of up in the air for him. He is in his mid-30s. He thought that Jen was the one. He thought they were going to be together forever. And he's a little bit baffled about why they've actually broken up, because as far as he's concerned, things were brilliant. His main job is as a comedian. He writes comedy routines. He performs them throughout London and up in the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which plays a big part in this book. However, when he starts going through this breakup, everything in his life seems to be falling apart. The comedy is where the title comes from, Good Material, and we follow him being reluctant about the breakup. He moves in with some friends who happen to be mutual friends. They're also friends of Jen, his ex-girlfriend, and he asks a lot of inappropriate questions to them and tries to not necessarily stalk her, but just isn't really giving her the space that they need. What I really enjoyed about this book is that Andy isn't the most likeable character. I found it very validating reading this book. It's very interesting that this is a woman writing a male point of view, because I think that does put some bias onto the way Andy is depicted. I have said in my wrap up that I think the book really delves into that feeling that a lot of women have, that men just don't listen to us. Our male partners often hear what we say, hear our complaints, but instead of listening and enacting change on those, often it's seen that women are nagging. If you go on TikTok, you will see so many videos of people talking about how many chances they've given their partners, how they're saying the same things over and over and over again and not getting their needs met. And then when they eventually leave, it's this big shock. And I think that is what is portrayed really well in this book. Dolly really makes us feel that Andy, despite clearly being in love with Jen, despite thinking the world of her, hasn't been meeting her needs. He hasn't been able to listen and enact change on the things that she's said to him that need to be changed for their relationship to work. He's kind of got complacent, he's kind of just going with the flow. There's some commitment issues that just don't seem to be resolved. They don't seem to want the same things, they're not communicating in the ways that she is really wanting, and it comes across as really frustrating. Like when you're reading this, you just want to shake him and tell him to open his eyes. And I really liked how just relatable that was, and I thought it was very interesting that we see this from Andy's point of view. We feel this from Andy's point of view rather than from Jen's point of view, because I think so many books talk about it from Jen's point of view, from the woman's point of view, that is a feeling that we relate to, that we know quite well. but to feel it from seeing another point of view, it's just that extra. I don't want to use the word frustrating again because I don't feel like I'm emphasizing enough just how frustrating it is, but it just makes you sit there and get really, really wound up. And you know what, in some ways it was just quite triggering. I just remember reading it thinking, oh my god, I've been in that exact same position, and exactly how Jen must have been feeling. And throughout this book we follow Andy as he's not only naive and unable to recognise Jen's perspective, but also really struggles to fit in with this new world, this new single life that he is experiencing. When he was last single, he was in his very early 30s, probably just turned 30. He had enjoyed his 20s, was ready to settle down, and all he'd wanted was a partner, somebody to live his life with. Now he is in his mid-30s, he is newly single, and he begins exploring the dating world again. We see what Dolly Alderton does best, and that is just really highlight just how toxic, difficult and frustrating dating is in the modern world. So much of the dating experience now revolves around dating apps. If you're not on dating apps, your experience of dating is probably quite limited. I'm saying that as somebody who has been single for 3 years now and hasn't had a long-term relationship for 6.5-ish years, and it's so frustrating of like, how do you meet people? I moved back to my very small hometown where everyone seems to still be with their childhood sweethearts, everybody's married, and I'm like, where are the people my age who are single? Where are they? It's hard to meet people, so you're kind of resigned to dating apps. And Andy kind of goes into this quite naively, thinking everyone on dating apps wants a relationship. Or if people say they don't want a relationship, they're just saying that to kind of act cool and collected. So Andy very quickly meets a much younger woman who's in her early 20s and begins a relationship of sorts with her. She's very adamant that they're very casual, that she doesn't want anything more than that, and they sleep together, they go on a few dates, but that's not the bulk of their relationship. And Andy sees themselves as together, as dating, as something that could turn serious. And the miscommunication between the two of them really takes a hold in this book and highlights how Andy is just out of touch with the dating landscape. And the way that he sees it is outdated. One of the concepts that I really like in this, and it's also quite a thing in Ghosts as well, is the exploration of situationships, which are such a modern concept. I don't even know when the idea of situationships came about, in the last 3-4 years. I don't think I'd heard of them before the pandemic hit, so it's a very recent thing. I think it's a very TikTok-y thing as well. It's definitely a younger generation thing, which I think this book highlights really well, because Andy kind of doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand that there can be these relationships that aren't exclusive and that casual sex is just that. He doesn't understand that when you don't communicate your needs or you don't accept somebody's needs, you kind of create this imbalance. That is what a situationship really is. I saw something recently that said a situationship is nothing to the other person. It's only something to one person in the relationship, and that's what makes it a situationship, because there is this undeniable tension. There is clearly one person who has feelings while the other person doesn't. Because it's unequal, it makes it really difficult to understand what the relationship is and makes it difficult to leave. And there's always hope that from one side that it can turn into something more. I think it's quite similar to like the friends with benefits situation, where people say don't do it because people will often gain feelings or one person will get feelings. And I think that's something that's really important to highlight in casual relationships, in friends with benefits, in situationships. I think it's very important that if you are having a casual relationship of any of these kinds, you have a limit that you're willing to accept. And for me, that limit is usually, if I catch feelings, I'm done. And I've been in situationships before where that has happened, where I thought, oh, I'm not going to catch feelings here. This is a situation that's just fun and exciting. And as soon as I've realised I've got feelings, I've had to ditch, because otherwise I go crazy. So that's something that in this book is explored really, really well. Also, I think it explores very subtly those age gaps. I can't remember exactly how old the younger woman is in this book, but I think she's around 23, whereas Andy is 35. And he again has this warped perception of what she wants from a relationship. and it highlights those differences and where those people are in their life stages. And like I said, throughout this book, Andy is also grappling with his comedy career. He's kind of failing because he isn't coming up with any good material. He's so fixated on his breakup and his new relationships that he isn't really aware that what he is performing, what he is writing, isn't hitting the mark. It's instead coming across as very bitter. And I think it's really interesting that it's portrayed this way because it highlights just how deeply a breakup can affect us if we're not dealing with it in the right way. Of course, one of the things with comedy and performance is hecklers and reviews and people giving their opinion, which Andy doesn't take very well, and it kind of links back into what we hear and what we read and what we interpret about why his relationship with Jen failed. We see that he is reluctant to accept criticism or even just direction. He's not able to take on board what people say without taking it to heart and taking it really, really personally, and then it erupting into a bigger thing than it is. I'm sure that there is more I could go into detail with about the comedy aspect of things, but I also think that it could be taken back, which is quite interesting to me because the title obviously comes from that idea of good material and comedy material. But without it, I still think it would be the same book. I don't think it matters what job Andy had. I think that criticism would hold him back no matter what. I know personally, when your personal life is affected by big things, whether that's a breakup or a family bereavement or family illness, your work performance can suffer and you can take on a lot of criticism in those times, particularly if you don't have a supportive boss or supportive employers, etc. But I do think that it could have been switched out, and for that reason I don't know if good material is necessarily the right title for this book, because I think that is so inherently linked to his career, whereas I think the bulk of the book is much more about his attitude. Now, the one thing that I will talk about now that might be considered a spoiler, so click away now if you don't want to know this. The last, I don't even know how much of the book, like I want to say about 50 pages, 70 pages, something like that, then switches to Jen's point of view. And this was the part of the book that I didn't enjoy so much. I feel like we should have just ended at the end of Andy's perspective rather than continue with Jen's perspective, because I felt there was so much that she said was already inferred, we already knew it, that it was just a waste of words. We find out that at one point in the book where Andy is first stepping out into the dating world, where he is messaging people online, we find out that Jen was actually catfishing him. And I feel like we didn't need to know that, and I feel like that it was unnecessary to become aware of this. I feel like it was almost obvious at the time when you're reading that part of the book, because it's just so strange that the way she disappears and the way she messages, I don't think we necessarily needed to know. But I also didn't really care at this point. We had spent so much time with Andy that when it came to reading Jen's point of view, I just felt like Dolly was rehashing what we already knew and almost not trusting the reader, if that makes any sense. So it felt like she was almost explaining what had happened throughout the book as if we hadn't already read that, as if we hadn't already read between the lines and understood exactly what was going on. So that was quite frustrating to me because I just wanted her to trust me. I wanted to just have my own interpretation and my own views. I didn't necessarily want to know explicitly what was and wasn't true, or what was and wasn't Jen's experience. I didn't care. I didn't need to know that. And I feel like if all Dolly wanted to tell us anything from Jen's point of view, maybe we could have had a couple of chapters throughout the book rather than this almost addendum at the end of the novel that just felt out of place, and I didn't love it, and it did take away from this book for me. I didn't dislike the book. I still really, really enjoyed the book, and I will continue to read Dolly Alderton, but it just kind of dulled the experience for me. It just felt unnecessary, and I don't like unnecessary things in books. I think it would have been much more powerful had it just ended at the end of Andy's perspective. So overall, what are my thoughts on Dolly Alderton's good material? Well, I did prefer ghosts, and I don't think that's any surprise. I think a lot of people have said that they prefer ghosts. I've heard some quite mixed reviews on good material, but that doesn't mean that I don't recommend it. I think it's a really good read. I think it's a really fun read, and I'm really glad that it was my first read of 2024. It got me off to a good start. But if you haven't read any Dolly Alderton and you are wondering which of her books to read, maybe I would say start with good materials, because I think if you read ghosts and love ghosts, you might be a little bit disappointed. Ghosts was one of my favourite books the year that I read it, and it still hits me in the heart every now and then. I still think about this book and what it evoked in me at the time. Good material, on the other hand, is kind of fading from my memory. It's not had the same lasting impact. So that is my review of Good Material by Dolly Alderton. I know it's quite a popular book, so I'd love to know your thoughts if you have read it down below. Do you agree or disagree with me? Were there any parts in the book that particularly stood out to you that you'd like to talk to me about? Because I have a lot of thoughts on it, and I think it would be so good to discuss with people. I've seen a lot of podcasts where people talk about this book, and I just think there's some really evocative parts of it that are just great discussion points. I hope you enjoyed this review. Let me know if you'd like me to do like an author spotlight on Dolly Alderton as well, because I really enjoy her work. As usual, I will also leave links down below to my Storygraph, my Instagram, and all that good stuff, so you can come and follow me on there and talk to me about books. And I will see you in another video very, very soon. Take care. Bye!